Hello lovelies, today we're taking a look at the latest thing for Elfking the Immortal, which I've been sent, so apparently they like their reviews, so there is that. I got it for free, full disclosure up front. As per usual, I am unaware of any horrendous views or awful politics or anything else I might disagree with that Lucid Eye Publications are involved in, so no need for a disclaimer on any of that, because I just don't know. This is Wyrms, Weird and Wonders, which is a rather slimline booklet for Elfking containing monsters and weirdness and artifacts. This is a very hard book to review for many of the same reasons that I find adventures hard to review, because it's almost impossible to avoid spoilers. You see, the strength and the problem with this book, beard here, the strength and the problem with this book is that this isn't just generic monsters, generic encounters, generic artifacts. Everything here has a story, which is kind of how it should be, really. But it also means that I can't just sit here and say, yes, this contains monsters like orcs and that you can put into your own game. It doesn't work quite like that, because they're all so individual. So if I tell you in any detail about any of the entries as spoiler territory, if one of your players would happen to watch this review, they would know important stuff about the monster or whatever else before it turns up. So that's an issue. We do get some bits and pieces on the lore behind worms and dragons and so on in the setting, which is nice. Have a few other aspects. Then we get some examples of various forms of creatures and entities. These are famous ones. These are not random encounters, pretty much. And these are much more on the scale of legendary creatures that you might find in mythology. Like the serpent in Norse mythology, or the dragon in the Germanic legends, or things like Beowulf. It's those kind of monsters, those kind of creatures. They all have some sort of legend aligned with them, a fairly in-depth description of their combat style, the weaknesses that they might have, all of that kind of thing. But it does mean that I can't really go into much detail. The artwork, as ever, appears to be AI generated, but they have trained that AI very well, and it does still consistently seem to produce material that puts me in mind of the Paper Tiger art books from the 1970s, which is something I say every time I review one of these. So it's certainly very effective. If you have a moral and ethical objection to AI, that might turn you off. If you don't, then you won't be put off by it. I will say, for a lot of small publishers, including myself, when we're tight for cash, AI presents an extremely alluring option, because no matter what people say, bad amateurish sketchy art, unless you really commit to that aesthetic, just isn't as appealing to people, and using AI doesn't appear to impact sales to any particularly major degree. And I think you would have an extremely hard time finding people these days who can do this old sort of fantasy book style. So again, I end up saying all of that on most videos I do reviewing Elfking stuff. So, but it bears repeating, because the AI conversation continues to evolve and change somewhat slowly. At least slightly more sensible people are having the discussions now from either side. So it's not just dragons, we have other monsters as well, but they're all just as characterful. Sometimes it's talking about a large number of them, as in the Merrin Horde here. Sometimes it's individuals. But again, I can't really go into a huge amount of detail on any of them because that would constitute spoilers, which again is the problem with reviewing adventures. So really what you do end up having here is a whole bunch of very highly individual, pretty detailed monsters and other entities that form encounters in their own right. So rather than being a bestiary in the sort of standard sense, rather what you have here is a bunch of monster-centered adventures where you have to write everything else around the creature, but there's plenty of inspiration and so on. I talked about the art. Let's talk about the layout again. The text is a lot more readable against the art backgrounds, and on the back cover it's quite a bit more readable than it has been before, but the interior text still looks like it was just laid out in Word. You can do better. I believe in you. you can lean in to the kind of Art Nouveau aesthetic you've got going on, the Aubrey Beardsley style. You could add some bells and whistles and tweaks without making it less readable. You could make better use of fonts without making it less readable. The art, for all that it is AI generated for the most part, not all of it, I don't think. That's great, but the text side and layout lets you down quite badly. So that's something I think you need to address moving forward to make everything look more professional and effective and more inspiring. Because simple blocks of text, for all that it's relatively readable, you can kind of get lost and stuck in it, or at least some people do. So breaking it up or having more visual elements can help people reference positions in the page and so on. But yeah, so then we go on to various different powerful treasures, relics, and artifacts that you might find throughout the world. And it kind of tells you roughly where a lot of them are. But again, these are all named artifacts, which could each and every one of them could have an adventure built up around them. But each and every one is quite characterful, quite engaging. Again, I just can't necessarily go into it in any enormous detail, but you will find that rather than a +1 sword, you will find a sword with a history and some sort of appropriate thematic power and so on, which is a lot more work and a lot less directly applicable perhaps to a lot of games, but it's also a hell of a lot more effective. So what more can I say, really? It is another Elfking book. It has a consistent level of quality with everything else. It has all the positives and negatives that I've said about Elfking books before. I am restricted from talking in any detail about any particular aspect of it. But this is an approach to magic items and to a lot of creatures that I think could be emulated more in other games, in other books. And I tend to find that the Elfking system and the way in which it approaches enemies, whether generally speaking as here or in its single player books, does tend to give you more of an impression of the kind of epic dramatic scale of the fight against these big, important and powerful creatures, which are more story beats than just sword fodder. So it's got that going for it. Scores then, in terms of style, I'll give it a 4 out of 5. You could drop that to a 3 out of 5 if you're really, really dead set against AI art. In terms of substance, it's not big enough. And the material in here, for all that it's great, because it's got lots of content to it, and lots of ways you could use it. It's also highly limited in that because every creature and every item is an individual creature or item, you can only really successfully use it once with the same group. So the reuse value aspect of substance is lacking there, which isn't to say it's bad. It's just that, that is a drawback of this kind of style of doing things. So in terms of substance, I think I'd give it a 3, but that's somewhat unfair because what you do have is covered in depth. So for me, that's 4 out of 5 for style, 3 out of 5 for substance, 7 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5, above average. If you're really into Elfking, it's probably a worthwhile pickup. And if you're considering creating sort of more named monsters in your games, then it might be worth a pickup for inspiration if it's within your sort of pricing. If you're dead set against AI, you could drop it a point, so that would be dead average pretty much, if you want to avoid supporting AI art. But it's not that simple, is it? When there's small publishers or publishers like myself that are hard up for cash this year, it provides an avenue for flashier, better looking games on a tight budget, and it doesn't seem to stop people buying them. So it's an interesting dilemma, but employ human artists where and when you can. Zang.
Satana Station is an addition to Machinations of the Space Princess. It's a whole sleazy space station, full of locations, services, adventures, and inspiration for your old-school space opera games. Over 100 locations, a bevy of non-player characters, and more plot hooks than you can shake an Arctura mega stick at. Buy it at post-mort.com, drive-thru RPG, and hard copy at lulu.com.
Everyone's so ordinary. They watch the world with blind eyes. Can't you hear them talking funny? Or you recite the same lines? If the robots win, we'll have to listen to techno. No, I'll never listen to techno.
And this is not a time to be dismayed. This is punk rock time. This is what Joe Strummer trained you for. It is now time to go. You're a good person. That means more now than ever.